41% of Singaporeans trust what influencers recommend, so brands are focusing on these partnerships to get noticed. To discuss this, we have Antoine Gross from Impact.com, Simon Toring from Cube Asia, and me, Robertson from Coda Payments. Welcome, everyone. First of all, what shifts in trust have made influencer recommendations more valuable today?
I think what is important here, what is interesting is really the speed of adoption. I'm sure Simon later may bring some data on that. But just like this region, just don't follow global trends. You really leapfrog them, you know? So live commerce, it took like years to develop it in China, where now it's been adopted almost in a month here, or just like a social platform like TikTok have rapidly evolved from being a pure entertainment to now a powerful shopping channel. But for me, what is the most, interesting here, most striking, I say, is like how we aligned with Southeast Asia unique, behavior. Because again, we are a region mobile first. We are social heavy on internet, and create like really perfect condition for all this this new model. The data tells really like a very straightforward story for me. Is like influencer marketing has evolved from being another marketing channel to really like just a business driver. And numbers are just compelling. Like consumer just not follow an influencer. They looking for entertainment and just looking for recommendation and validation for the decision. So I'd say that really like the reason, like it's not a trend, it's just like a fundamental change in how Southeast Asia consumer discover and decide what they want to buy.
Yeah, so this is the second year we have conducted research into the impact of influencer marketing on e-commerce in Singapore and the rest of Southeast Asia. And year on year, we can see that most of the markers of, let's say, the importance and popularity of influencer marketing continue to take up. A couple of stats on Singapore. So the first is, in our consumer survey this year, we saw that more than 2/3 of Singaporean respondents have made a purchase of a product or service online because of the recommendation of an influencer or a celebrity. So that's a high figure and one that has risen from last year. We've also surveyed Singaporean consumers on what types of influencers they trust the most when it comes to deciding what services or products to buy. And here we can see that, particularly in Singapore, the size of following correlates quite well to the trust and impact of an influencer recommendation. So it is really what we call mega influencers with the very high followings that seem to have the biggest impact on where consumers decide to spend their money.
Yeah, speaking about the gaming industry in Singapore, the gaming industry is expected to reach 71 million USD, with 74% of them being men, 68% of them being women. And the age range that we're looking at is about 16 to 34, with 67% of them actually watching video game content online. So this speaks into the necessity of having influencers speak out on these content as well. Consumers in Singapore today want realness, authenticity, and relatability in their content when making decisions. And influencers, especially micro-influencers, have built super close relationships with their audience, and this builds trust among them. And this trust goes a long way.
These are very interesting numbers. Can you explain how are influencers driving subscription growth across the region? Go ahead, Antoine.
I think the subscription economy in Southeast Asia is really fascinating about changing customer behavior, because what we observe is like 80% of the consumer embrace subscription service, which is quite remarkable for a region, that traditionally prefer one-time purchase. So what I think is interesting in terms of adoption is media obviously lead the charge. What is interesting here is really like that this emerging category, the food, where you can rely on healthy, on the food blogger or the healthy influencer sort of, which effectively has the most powerful effect on consumer decision. So it really show how influencer marketing can be super effective in building trust and driving adoption in newer subscription categories.
So as Antoine mentioned, more than 8 out of 10 Singaporean consumers have an active paid subscription plan of some kind, either a media or video service like Netflix, or even pet subscriptions, food, meal delivery, and these types of different emerging subscription categories. And we can see that in Singapore in particular, although the absolute value of influencer recommendations for such subscription purchases is a little bit lower than what we see in, for example, Thailand and Vietnam, still more than 3 out of 4 consumers in Singapore state that their selection of subscription services have been impacted by or influenced by the advertisement or organic posting of an influencer or celebrity.
We are hearing a lot of really good feedback when it comes to influencer value in Singapore. But is there also a downside to it? What challenges do brands face when collaborating with influencers in Singapore?
So I'd say there's, a few challenges, and let me break down this into maybe 3 observations. The number one is there's definitely a supply-demand, imbalance in Singapore influencer ecosystem, because the pool of local influencers definitely is scarce somehow. So, but lead to some premium pricing, but often will exceed the original benchmark. So, and will definitely impact the campaign ROI. So that's one element. The second thing also, I think what we need to recognize is Singaporean demographic are slightly different from the rest of the region in a way that the region is much younger, leading to higher social media consumption, where a more aging population will still, rely on a more traditional media consumption, such as, radio and TV. So I think that essentially the 3 main reasons why I will explain is a bit more challenging is one, we have a sort of limited pool of influencer in Singapore compared to the rest of the region, and so it put pressure on the pricing. The second thing is really the content consumption, which is more global than only local, unlike the rest of the region, where by design you really want to connect with the people who are based in your market or in your country. And last thing is really about the way they consume media, which doesn't only rely on one channel, the influencer, but really across multiple channels.
So indeed, the first challenge that comes to mind is that for this year's consumer survey, we have polled consumers in the 6 main markets in Southeast Asia, and 5 of them, excluding Singapore, we see that all of the top influencers mentioned for purchase recommendation power are all locals. And Singapore is just so different there. We see foreign celebrities, foreign influencers. And as Antoine mentioned, that just means it's much harder to engage them for campaigns and marketing that is specifically for Singapore, because these creators only have a small share of their audience coming from Singapore. The other challenge that comes to mind is a bit about the distribution of influencer marketing across different product categories. So we see very high adoption of influencer marketing, particularly in beauty and fashion, but the adoption is still much lower outside of those categories. So in electronics, but also non-physical goods categories like subscriptions, travel, fintech, and so on. So I think looking forward in Singapore and the rest of Southeast Asia, it remains to be seen how well this type of marketing can be applied outside of these categories where we've seen a lot of it, for the influencer marketing landscape to continue evolving in the coming years.
I'll concur with our previous speakers, and I would like to add that ensuring influencer audiences align with the brand target market can be tricky, and especially measuring ROI for particular platforms such as Instagram, such as stories that you post, can also remain a challenge for brands. Influencers often prefer paid placement as well over commission deals for more stability, but sometimes the brands do not allow for that due to guidelines and other factors involved. But this compromises on authenticity as well for the influencer, which may not be favorable for them. And this will also play into the connection and the long-term trust that influencers will be able to build with their audience. Singaporeans, generally, when it comes to gaming, they prefer polished, professional content. Whereas if you look at Indonesia, for example, they lean towards a more casual approach, entertaining and a humorous kind of content. And when browsing gaming content, Singaporean audiences tend to prefer YouTube and Twitch for live streams, game reviews, and even esports content. While, again, for example, Indonesia, audiences primarily prefer YouTube and Facebook gaming, with a strong focus of mobile-friendly platforms as well.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Antoine, Simon, and May.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, those were Antoine Gross, General Manager for Southeast Asia and India at Impact.com, Simon Toring, co-founder at Cube Asia, and May Robertson, Senior Marketing Manager for Global Affiliates at Coda Payments. For more news, visit sbr.com.sg.